my daughter looks at me, she's like, who takes a baby? Like, who does that? Like, are they gonna ever come home again for Shabbos? You know? It's like really hard as a parent. Like, you can't find words for these things. You know, they are unanswerable questions. You know, they're impossible. Then when you have a child who's emotionally sensitive and in tune, like it's straight to the heart. It's like so hard for them to process. We don't know how to process it. Like we're still trying to cope and find out and understand, and like it's very hard for that child and for me.
Welcome back to the Jews Next Door podcast, where each month we explore a different topic of our parenting hierarchy with the goal of raising the next generation of passionate and committed Jews. I'm your host, Rabbi Yair Menchel, and in this episode, we are continuing to talk about parenting during the Israel crisis. This week, joined by my close friend, my boss in the OU, the director of GenAleph, Rabbi Phil Karesh, to talk about what it's like parenting children in America during this time, especially for someone who is running a parenting initiative. So, first of all, thank you so much, Rabbi Phil, for joining us and taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Yair. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and thank you for having me.
You and I have been working together for a lot of years now, and we've known each other for many, many years. And your primary focus at the OU as the director of GenAleph is interacting with communities, and you're very, very involved right now in parenting. So I'm curious, first things first, before we even get to your own family, what have you been, you just launched in both, Boca and Hollywood. So what are you getting from the different communities? What have they been saying to you during this time?
Yeah, we had launched in Boca in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which of course was prior to the current war. And then we launched in Hollywood right after everything happened. We launched a week or two after that took place. And, there is a commonality of what predated the war and what is after the war. And then, of course, there's an acute pain in parenting right now. I think in general, what predates the war and what has been true for the last many years is that, speaking broadly, is that we as parents are distracted. Sometimes we feel like we don't have the wisdom to navigate difficult parenting circumstances. Parenting is really hard in 2023. We have a lot of challenges that are unique to our generation. We have our children who have a primary entertainment, which is screen time, and what they're watching qualitatively, and the medium in which they're watching is difficult. And parents themselves are having a hard time paying attention. I just know for myself, to make ends meet, we're working very hard. My wife and I both have full-time jobs. And those do have a burden on us. So that kind of is like the terra firma of parenting. It's kind of the state of the union, as it were, which is that
Sure.
we're struggling as parents in general. And then, of course, there's after what's been dubbed the Black Sabbath. There's after October 7th, which has a different level of acuteness and pain and complexity. And as you and I speak, tonight, we'll talk through some of those things. But I would say that's really what I've been hearing a lot from the communities that I've been dealing with, not just in Florida. We're also gearing up to work with other communities across the country. So in those conversations, I'm hearing pretty much the same thing. The same issues seem to permeate the Orthodox community.
Sure. Wow. And, I'm curious, what was your thought process when, everything happened on October 7th and Hollywood, launch was coming up? Was there a thought of, should we maybe not launch? And I guess, in the end of the day, you did end up launching. And I know we had many conversations about it. What was the thought process to then continue to launch?
Yeah, I mean, just to step up a couple of rungs from GenAleph, GenAleph is a major project of one department. And there are, there's dozens of departments in the OU. And basically every department, as it related to every one of their projects, had to make a cheshbon. They had to make a decision as to the appropriateness of continuing their programming throughout this very difficult time in Jewish history. And in speaking with the leadership of the OU, it became clear very quickly that we need to be doubling down our efforts on parenting and not stepping back. When we're struggling without war as parents, and we are, So all the more so, we need as much fortitude, as much information, good information. The world is filled with information that's both good and bad, and we need to really identify and create in a crystallized form the best way, as it were. This is not a great topic in general to talk about painful things, but the best way for us to talk to our children. That's why we leaned on a lot of experts. We leaned on Dr. Pelkovitz. We ran a program with him, of course, and Dr. Blumenthal, who we've spoken with numerous times. So, we really felt, and I shared this openly with the community in Hollywood when I shared in my opening remarks that we hesitated about continuing our programming. But at the end of the day, our children are our most precious commodity, because when we pine for generational continuity, the vehicle of that continuity is our children. And if we don't have the capacity, the skill, or the knowledge to help them navigate a very, very difficult situation like this, so then we need to reinforce. We need to strengthen ourselves, to be mechazik ourselves as much as possible to navigate the unnavigatable. These are unanswerable questions. They're very, very challenging. But that was really how we came to the decision. It was a rather quick decision internally within the OU, within our department, that we were going to be moving forward, because we need to fortify ourselves as much as possible, because the next generation is our responsibility.
For sure. And I know, just to give a preview to our listeners, next week we're going to be launching Child Safety Month, and we debated as well. Should we be doing it? Should we not be doing it? Because with everything going on, and we decided, even though everything going on, it is such an important topic. How could we not make sure to address it in a very serious way? And we have a whole lot of programming coming your way with that. So I totally, 100%.
Exactly right. I'll just double down on your comment, because Rabbi Menchel, you've been working so hard on the project for Child Safety Month. And yes, we do need to prioritize what we focus on. But if we're going to be real about child safety, there are issues of child safety even in a war, right? We still need to protect our children as much as possible. So we have to work parallel paths. We have to work on our basic parenting. We have to work on crisis parenting, as it were, in regards to how we talk to our children about crisis. And we have to do preventative work to ensure that our children are safe down the road. So definitely so many facets to parenting, but we have to work a lot of parallel paths to ensure, and this is really GenAleph's broader goal, is to ensure that the next generation is a generation of passionate and committed Jews, which is a line that you share all the time. So definitely, I'm excited to experience what I hope everyone will experience, which is hearing from the experts on child safety to strengthen our own families individually and collectively.
100%. So let's dive a little bit into your family. So first, before we even get into any, what you spoke to them about and how you spoke to them, just give us a little bit of context. What is the age range of the children in your family? What are we dealing with? How many children do you have? What's the age range?
Baruch Hashem, my wife Rachel and I are blessed with 6 amazing, individualized, fantastic children. We started our children with twin boys who are now 17. They're seniors in high school. After that, we have a freshman in high school who's 14 years old. He's a boy as well. And then our next 2 are girls, and they are 12, which my daughter just had her bas mitzvah post October 7th. And they're 2 at the same type of, how are you ma'arev simcha with such an emotional time. We had to navigate that as well, similar to the way that we did here in regards to our programming. And my daughter's 12, and then the next daughter is 9 years old, and our youngest is a boy, and he's 5 years old. So 4 boys, 2 girls, spanning 12 to 13 years. And not only are the years meaningful, but when we think from a lens of educators, there's also developmental stages that we're going to get into as we talk about each age bracket. But I just want to say at the outset that every one of the conversations that I've had with my children, certainly the preliminary ones as we were starting to learn things, were very complex in regards to not the words that came out, but choosing the words that would come out. That was very hard. We have to message properly. We can't be overly stoic. We have to show our natural emotions. I'll just give you, before we even break into age brackets, on October 7th, when we didn't have access to any information, it was crippling emotionally because we didn't know. And then Motzei Yontif, and this was a mistake on my part, I admit, I sat at my dining room table, and my kids were kind of all sitting around as I was, for the first time, consuming the horrible atrocities that took place in southern Eretz Yisrael to our brothers and sisters. And I took my laptop and I went to a couple of websites that whatever websites I relied upon for some information, just to glean the basics. And then I saw, the information about the concert and about just the depravity, the pain, and I on the spot was crying. I totally freaked out my children, and I just closed my laptop and walked away to not freak them out anymore. And one of my children, who's a little bit more emotionally sensitive, came over and asked me, Abba, are you okay? And then I cried twice as hard. As parents, these are scenarios that we're not prepared for. This is not supposed to be the way the world turns. Our history has it that way. We know that as Jews, historically, it's unfortunately part of our storied past. But as I look back on that moment, in a way, I wish I would have looked privately so that I could package my feelings. And at the same time, maybe the other side of that coin is maybe I did the right thing by letting them just see me as an adult, as someone who cares about Klal Yisrael, that they see that I'm emotionally connected to my brothers and sisters who I don't know across the globe. I don't know. I'm torn as to what was right or wrong.
It sounds powerful to me.
It was very uncomfortable as a dad. It was an unanticipated scenario. It just didn't, again, of course I would have been emotional. It didn't cross my mind that I would cry. I just didn't. It was kind of unplanned,
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first engagement that my children saw for me and my wife, this kind of emotionally charged response to atrocity, to another pogrom, to whatever the right word is that describes October 7th. Right. So that was kind of the opening first communication that we had with our children once Yontif let out.
So and you said before that it was each conversation had its own complexities to it. So take us through that a little bit. Each by each age and each child, what does that look like? Like you said, you have one who is a little more sensitively inclined. So right. What does that look like for that child versus the other children? What take us through that a little bit.
Right. So my wife and I kind of naturally divided the three older children, 14, 17, and 17. We kind of put them in a similar group. It happens to be that my 14-year-old is pretty mature for his age, so we kind of put him with the older kids, and this was hard. But I feel that there is a certain age. That's part A. There's a certain age, and also a certain reality at which point you can't hide anything from your kids anymore. Developmentally, our children need to have grit, and that's something that we generationally lack in our children, is that our children don't get a lot of bruised knees because we bubble wrap them. But here I had to share everything with them fairly openly because they have access to the internet. And even though we have numerous layers of protection in place for our home to make sure that the content that they view is safe, but whatever news company you're looking at .com is not caught in filters. It's not an inappropriate website. It's a normative. You're looking at a normative website for the news. So with them, we were fairly blunt and open that there's a terrorist organization that hates the Jews, and in their charter, they would rather we be dead than alive. And we just had to be open with them that this is what's happening. We didn't overly drill down into the gory details, but we did tell them that it was a very violent attack, and a lot of people had died. The number we now know is 1,400, and plus every neshama counts, every one of them. And with them, we kind of really tried to be practical in regards to outcomes, that we here on our side of the world have a responsibility to learn Torah. We know from Chazal that Torah is magna umatzla. That stories of the greats, of David HaMelech, that his neshama couldn't even be taken because he was constantly learning. They made a sound outside. We know Torah can protect people even from afar. That's a big deal, and we should be kind of channeling our learning to be protective for Klal Yisrael, for our brothers and sisters. We're still in harm's way. We still have Chayalim who are working deep in Gaza in hand-to-hand combat in extremely dangerous, treacherous circumstances, extremely difficult. So with that age bracket, with the 14-year-old and the 17-year-olds, we were clear to them that as to what was going on. We did
And
warn them.
what are you finding like now? Meaning, we're a little over a month out. Is it ongoing conversation? Is it not?
Yeah.
Is there constant updates or like?
We've found that with this age bracket that there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, that like they've kind of, I presume what's happening is that they kind of don't really want to be in the weeds because it's very painful. And even when, let's say, I'm going early to say Tehillim in the base medrash, we're like, oh, I did it yesterday, not in a bad way. It's not a criticism. It's just
Right.
the age bracket. It's a normative response for the age bracket to say like, yeah, we said Tehillim this morning in yeshiva, which is normal. I presume that's a healthy coping mechanism. Frankly, sometimes, and I'm in my 40s, sometimes I feel that way, that like I need to not be hearing things now. I need to turn off, and I happen to not. I can't watch the graphics. I'm like very sensitive about it. I can't watch a lot of it, but there is a natural cognitive dissonance that adults go through also. It was probably more noticeable for children. My wife and I were kind of talking after one of these dialogues. We're like, is this normal? That like, well, yeah, it's normal. Like we both kind of turned the corner at the same time. So now we're kind of in a plateau of sorts in regards to our conversations, because there's a plateau in regards to information, which is there's a continuing, pursuit of destroying and undermining Hamas and all of those who are interested in hurting the Jewish people. And there's a continuous focus on Tehillim in all of the schools that my children are in. You get the bookmarks of the soldier from the littler kids, and there's different, again, Ba'asher Husham at every age. That's kind of how things are going. It did plateau a little bit, but not without constant focus from us. Like they see, my wife, regularly davens at home. They see a ramped up version of Tehillim. They see someone who's emotive and connected and deep and real about it, and that there are tears, So they're getting a good chinuch on that front from my wife, that's for sure.
Sure. And would you say that your child who is more sensitively inclined, that it was harder for them to move on from that, like that's like plateaued for them the same way, or for them it's also?
I'll tell you a story about this child. There's a group of women in Chicago that a couple of weeks ago banded together and working together with some foundations. They built a Shabbos table. They got city permits in a park and up on McCormick, which is an arterial street here in our neighborhood. They built a Shabbos table of 242 seats, the Shabbos table that would never be sat in. And they put a picture of each person who's a captive, and they put it on each seat. And to draw out the appropriate emotions, when it was a child, they put a high chair, and they put sippy cups, and they put teddy bears and toys. And, this was on the news, local CBS news here. And my wife and I went. My wife was involved as one of the volunteers to help set things up. And as they set things up, and when the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who was one of the partners, was there in Chicago speaking, we were there. Subsequently, my wife said, Phil, why don't you take our child to go see the tables? And I didn't really, again, I wish I was a little bit more like, okay, how am I going to do this? I took my child, we drove there, parked, got out of the car, and we were kind of walking around the tables. My daughter looks at me. She's like, "Who takes a baby? Like, who does that? Like, are they gonna ever come home again for Shabbos? It's like really hard as a parent. Like, you can't find words for these things. They are unanswerable questions. They're impossible. And then when you have a child who's emotionally sensitive and in tune, like it's straight to the heart. It's like so hard for them to process. We don't know how to process it. Like we're still trying to cope and find out and understand. And like, It's very hard for that child, and for me. It's
Wow.
it's very difficult because there are no answers. Like like if you've ever read the English during Kinos on Tisha B'Av, like you read these stories and you're like, well, half of a fellow, like it's low.
Right.
Like we compartmentalize it the second we see it. Like we can't even like let it come in because like, what do you mean they're children? What do you mean that they pillaged communities? What do you mean they burnt people? But that's what happened here in 2023. Thousands of years later, way after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, these things are happening now. So that was.
We said never again, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, and that's one of the many reasons that the OU has been, I would dare say, forceful in promoting the rally in Washington D.C. to get as many people there as possible to really try and let the world know that anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head, and in ways that are so surprising. This is like it's a good and evil conversation. Like there's a clear victim here. Like there's you can, whatever the politics are, and not for us to discuss here, but there's definitely a scenario of victim when people wear GoPros into communities and they slaughter and murder individuals in savage way. Like, so now we're seeing it in a way it's like, as we would say in the learning world, it's like lo yu'uman. Like, wait, what? Like, how did the tables turn? Like, how are we in this scenario now? This is not a logical progression. It doesn't make sense. It's hard to understand. So yeah. The never again is we're on the cusp of figuring out what the next kufa of the Jewish people is going to look like. And we don't know the answers to those questions. And that's why it behooves us to be involved. B'hishtadlos in advocacy. B'hishtadlos, we have to try and share healthy, balanced information. And then, of course, Beruchnias, we have to storm the heavens. And our davening has to be different. It has to be different. It can't be the same anymore. No, we're not. It's not like, okay, I need to work on my kavanah now. No, it's next level. Now we're kicked up a notch, 10 notches. We're dealing with people who are little babies from 9 months to people who are in their 80s, who are held hostages. Lo yu'uman, like it's so hard for the brain to package the information. So when my daughter is sitting there looking at this sippy cup and a teddy bear, there's no words to answer the question. What do you want to say? You want me to tell you that they're evil? Push it that they're evil. You want me to tell you that there are people on earth who?
What does a parent say to a child then? How does a parent explain the fact that like the hostages is still going? That is still going on, and that meaning everything else has. You're right, in a way, like feels like a little bit like it has plateaued. But the hostages is something that there's no plateauing there in a way.
Right.
So how do we talk to our children in a way that they can deal with that?
With this child who was a little bit more sensitive, I couldn't even get a sentence out. I cried and she came over to me and gave me a hug, which again, same thing. Like when you get hugs from your children when you're crying, it's very hard because there's a sweetness to the child's sensitivity toward you as a parent. It's supposed to be the other way where we coddle our children, not where they coddle us. I never answered her question. I never said anything after that. I don't know what to say. Information-wise, I don't know what to say. As I reflected on the conversation and spoke with my wife about it later, and there was a deep message in silence. There was a very deep message there, which is that first of all, I'm hurting that people's children are not home, and I don't even know who they are personally. I'm hurting because they're part of Klal Yisrael. It's a pasuk, Sep Pizura Yisrael. The Jewish people are considered to be like a scattered sheep. You've got people in France, you've got people in Eretz Yisrael, you have people Nebuch in Gaza, you have people all over the planet. And, it's like sometimes when you're in the airport and like I fly frequently and I see a Yid on the plane, there's a nod. Shalom. It's a Shalom Uvracha. It's a little nod. You recognize we're kindred spirits a little bit. And the nod is reciprocated every time, no matter what type of Yid it is. There is that deep bond, that fabric that connects all of us. And that, again, without intent, but I'm happy that it happened in retrospect. That was the message that my daughter got because they're part of us. And she saw that in me. She saw that. The last time my daughter saw me cry was by the patir of my brother. She was like only associating these two things as like the severity of losing a family member, same feelings. Obviously there's a different acuteness with a sibling because you spent your whole life with them, but
Right,
those are the
right.
last times she saw me cry. So in her head, it means somebody's in a bad situation. So that was from my estimation, again, in retrospect, because it wasn't intended, it was a good message for her to hear. But there are no words to explain to a child, to a 12-year-old, this is why they've taken those children. Like, yeah, there really are no, from my perspective as a dad, I couldn't find the words. And even if you ask me in a less emotional moment what the right words are to talk to a 12-year-old about why people would take little children, I'm not aware of the words to share other than we really don't understand what's going on here. And we need to daven, and let's pick a name for someone to daven for and to daven for them. For a young child to get overly graphic about the details is unhealthy. They can't handle it. Most adults can't handle it. Certainly children can't handle it. So we have to also be giving information with the younger. So there's like the bracket number one was the older kids, like the teens, the teenagers. And the younger's bracket is like the tweens, kind of right in the middle there, like 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, 13. There in that bracket, you have to give enough information that you're kind of quelling their curiosity, but not any information that's going to make them have nightmares. And because I don't think anyone can handle any of this, honestly. I have yet to find anyone who's just okay. But we just have to be careful with our kids to not harm them in the process of talking to them.
Sure. I'm curious, Baruch Hashem, you are very steeped in parenting in GenAleph, and your wife, who is running Upward Chicago, which is a mental health organization focused on teens in the Orthodox community. Do you feel like the two of you are more equipped in a way to navigate, all the different challenges that parents are dealing with right now because of that? Like, or do you have specific strategies that you would recommend because of the fact that you're so steeped in parenting and that your wife's so steeped in it?
Well, I cheated because I happened to have been interviewing Dr. Norman Blumenthal about 8 days after all of this went down. So I wrote down, before I interviewed him in Hollywood, the 8 to 10 questions that were bothering me that I did not know how to answer. So I did kind of have a little bit of a portal to, one of the experts in trauma. Of course, Dr. Blumenthal from OHEL is the head of their trauma world over there. He's exceptional. No, I don't feel more equipped. In a way, I feel crippled because I feel like I'm supposed to be more equipped, but there's not like a training manual for these. I mean, there are training manuals, but for your average parent, of which I consider myself an average parent, I really just fell into the emotional space more than I did into what is the right words space. It had right that night on Motzei Yom I sat down with all of my kids by Havdalah. And there I forced myself not to cry because we had some guests at the table as well. So I was talking to all of my kids and I tried to speak in a way that every age bracket could grasp whatever they needed to grasp, like trying to kind of put out the right information. So I shared with them that, the people in Eretz Yisrael have really been hurt. There are some people who are enemies of the Jews, and they have hurt some of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, and it's a difficult time for the Jewish people. And we really need to daven, and we need to learn. And we can, Mommy and Abba are here to answer any questions. That's a big piece, anyways. That making yourself available even without the answers, because a lot of the times that our children need us, it's for hugs and it's for kisses and it's for warmth and the connection. My wife spoke this past week in Chicago, and one of the things that she said that she spoke about is that physical contact actually plays a meaningful role in regards to the coping of adults and children, to ensure that there's that release of the chemicals in the brain that are calming. There's a piece to that, and we should, increase that that meaningful affection with our children, the hands on the cheek and a hug and an extra few seconds in the brachas on Friday night, if that's your custom. But to your question, I don't feel more equipped. I feel perfectly unequipped to talk to my kids about this in the right way. Dr. Blumenthal was a big help. And, there are some
What were some of those 8 questions? I'm curious.
Well, one of the questions that I asked him is, how do we talk to our children when there are no answers? Which was similar to what I went through with my daughter at this display of the table. And he shared the principle that I've already alluded to, which is trying to strike the balance between giving enough information enough safe information that they feel like they're not clueless, and at the same time shielding them from information that is traumatic. And the hardest part of all of this, and this really requires that we as parents are really drilled in, is that every child is so different in their emotional makeup. So if you have a child who hides their feelings, that doesn't mean they don't have feelings. It just means that they hide them, so you have to be gentle with them. If you have kids who really have a tremendous fortitude and grit, and you know that they can handle difficult things, you can speak more openly with them. So the individual characteristics is a huge piece, and a lot of the programs that we run, one of the resources that we have in GenAleph is a partnership with University of Washington, and we actually teach their curriculum called Guiding Good Choices. And one of the key components of their world of information is recognizing your children's individual characteristics before you parent them. Because if you don't know we often as parents, and I struggled from this a lot, certainly in the earlier years of parenting, where I had this cookie cutter version of parenting and I applied it to child 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. No, you can have basic klalim. I can have a rule, for example, that my children have to say please and thank you. We're firm about that in our house. But the way that you execute that can be different for each child. The rules are there, the measures are there, but the application to the children are different. So here, that's most definitely true as well. Each of my children are very different. I have twin boys. My twin boys are in different high schools. Every child needs to be matched. You can't, it's square peg, round hole. You have to communicate with them in the right way. So if I'm struggling with how to talk to my children, that's probably a good sign that I'm trying to align the words with the needs of that child. So that was a big yesod that Dr. Blumenthal was talking about when we spoke together with him in Hollywood with 80, 90 people present who were sitting at the edge of their seats listening to him try and answer these questions because they're unanswerable. They remain unanswerable. And, I remember during keynotes, because that's like the only thing that's close that in my memory bank of certainly in our lifetime, the only thing that we're ever exposed to that sounds like this is the English translation of the keynotes. What else have I'm 43. What else have I experienced other than isolated moments of barbarism, which are still horrible, that we've adjusted to in some crazy way? Like, that's not normal either. Did they only kill 2 people? Whew. Oh yeah, we escaped the bad one. We've adjusted to terror. We've adjusted to that. And that has no place in the world. It's unfortunately commonplace, but it should not in our cognition. We should never accept it. But our brains have prepped us and said, wait, we have to tolerate a little bit. Again, this is psychobabble. We have to tolerate a little bit because otherwise we'll be emotionally distraught with every death. We should be emotionally distraught with every act of terror. We should. But we have to protect our brains are doing this automatically where we try to shield, okay, it's only one. Okay, so I can be civil that I can handle that. So these are very difficult sugyas, and the level of atrocity and volume of people, 1,400 people killed, 240 people held in captivity. They're unspeakable words. And I really feel that one of the pillars in communicating with our children is that which we communicate without words. One of the pillars that we need to hang on to is how our kids see us emoting, how they feel that we are feeling. And that's a really important thing that we need to do. They need to see us being sad about this. They need to see us grabbing another Tehillim, because that speaks to how we feel, even when there are no words. They know that we're in pain. They see that in us. They see that in my wife. They see that in me, that it's hard for us to navigate. My wife has cousins whose husbands are on the front lines. We don't know exactly where because they can't tell us, but they're very active. And you see these pictures of him coming home for Shabbos for 12 hours, for 14 hours, and his kids are pouring over him with tears. Our kids need to see that we have those feelings as well. We're Klal Yisrael. We're one people. We're one group. We're a tiny group. We're a contentious group. We fight. We have differences between one another. Not now. Not now. Our children need to feel that we feel achdus. They need to feel that I know that I am one with from secular, Haredi, Zioni, colors and stripes. That's not what we're talking about now. Right now, we're talking about avas hatzibur, of loving Klal. They need to feel that in us. And that's part of our chinuch in moments like this, even without words. That much I know. Even without words, I don't know what the words are. But I know that our kids should feel us emoting and being emotionally real and authentic about the pain that our brothers and sisters are experiencing.
Wow. I was going to ask for a final message, but that was a very strong message.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing a little insight into what the parenting has been like in the Karesh home for the past month, and just in general. Really could tell how thoughtful you and your wife are towards parenting, and really a major thank you.
There are no atheists in a foxhole. We sometimes feel, in many scenarios, even ones that predate October 7th, we're like, oh, what are we supposed to do here? Like, is there a manual? Can somebody please guide us with the various chinuch issues that we deal with at home, like every family? It's hard to parent. It really is. And the klalim are there. The applications are difficult, and we have to daven our eyes out. And I remember just a story as a concluding message. They asked one of the greats of the previous generation. They asked the Chassam Sofer, "Can you tell me, just like, how did you raise your kids?" So he took off his hat and he turned it over. He said, "I filled this hat with tears many times over. You would think you're going to raise your child stam behishtadlus, that you read a book on parenting and that you took. That's a piece. That's a chelak chashuv. You should be doing your ishtadlus and taking courses and asking Eitzah when you need, and going to your Rav and going to the people who are really experts in the field of chinuch. Yes, 100% you should do that. But there's also tears, and tears never fail. It may not be that you'll get your answer today, but you'll get your answer. And we need to remember that tefillah is one of the most, if not the most powerful vehicle of change in our lives, parenting notwithstanding. And the Chassam Sofer taught us that yesod by turning his hat over and looking into the depth of his hat and saying, the reason my children are the way that they are, the reason my children came out the way that they came out, is not because of my merit, but it's because of my tears and my tefillos and my prayers. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu answered them. So that has to be a major component of our world of parenting. There's a Rav in Chicago, Rabbi Zev Cohen. I heard him say this with Famale. Not a day should go by that you daven without your children's names, your child, Ben the mother. There should not be a day that goes by that those words don't leave your lips. Not a day. Every day you daven for your children by name. Not a day should go by. So that's a major piece of our chinuch as well. Look, you and I work together. We're steeped in running parenting initiatives and programming. That's the hishtadlus side of things. That's not the be all and end all. That's the hishtadlus side, and we need that. It's critical. We need the data. We need the information. We need to motivate ourselves 100%. But if you do that without the Yiddish side, without the crying and the shrying, you've missed a major component of parenting. You can't have one without the other. You certainly can't have good Yiddish children without crying in the siddur.
It's very true. Very, very true. Wow. Powerful final words. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate your time. And
thank you for having me. I really appreciate the schmooze. And I feel like I just had a therapy session with you. So it's I'm appreciative of the opportunity to speak together. Thank you very much, Rabbi, for the amazing work that you do.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Jews Next Door. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Reach out to us. Reach out to me at Yair@GenAleph.org. hi@GenAleph.org. You can check us out on the website. You could leave a question there. We'd love to be in touch. Please be in touch. Check us out on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door. Hit me up on Twitter at Yair Menchel. And we're on TikTok now too. We have some great content, a lot of really great insights into parenting, tips, parenting pointers, reaction videos, and quotes. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of articles. You want to check it out. Check it out at GenAleph.org. You won't be sorry you did. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Looking forward to another great episode next week.